Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and I have with me today a member of the society, Elliot, and we wanted to chat a little bit and just kind of think through, why does somebody come to First Unitarian Society? How do you end up there? And a little bit about your religious, quote-unquote, journey. So tell me a little bit, where do you come from, Elliot?
So I was brought up in the Evangelical Free Church of America. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all.
I am not familiar with that one.
So it's kind of like, let's see, it's pretty conservative, pretty similar to Lutheranism. You know, they're, friendly with other congregations and whatnot. Let's see, definitely against gay marriage, definitely young earthers. Evolution is fake, and tend to come down the line conservative politically. So that's where I was, brought up. And then, what was the other question?
Well, then, okay, we've got you situated there. What made you begin to think outside of that particular box?
Okay, so I remember that we had different summer camps. Some were dedicated to Lutheran and some were dedicated to our particular church. And I was wondering, what's the difference between Lutheranism and evangelicalism, which, I didn't know. So I looked in the dictionary, and they said that evangelicalism holds that the Bible is the only holy thing on the earth. And I thought, well, yeah, I can get around that. I mean, that describes, what I believe. And then, I kind of thought about that a little bit more, and I figured it's kind of silly to look about what you believe, look yourself up in the dictionary, because, if you don't know what you believe, then you probably shouldn't say that you believe it, right? So it's kind of silly when you kind of ask your pastor what you believe, or what's the official party line.
Right.
And that kind of got me thinking that you shouldn't really define yourself in terms of a name.
Okay.
That
right.
if you're Christian, kind of say that maybe I'm convinced of the Trinity. I believe the Earth is X number of years old, rather than relying on a name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So you began to think outside of that box a little bit. Where did you start? You mentioned the young earth idea. Did you begin to read a little bit about?
Yeah, I guess I don't remember a specific time when I finally accepted the earth might be older than a few generations. I guess maybe in high school, where it's, like 97% of biologists. But yeah, the whole deal, like global warming is fake and everything, but slowly over time, as you kind of look into it, you kind of see that maybe there is something to science.
So what do you think is the motivation? Let's try to get into the heads of the people who do stay in that tradition. What is the motivation to deny what is pretty well basic elementary science almost?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say the biggest one is presuppositionalism, that it's true because it is. You're kind of begging the question that, I have my faith and it's true, and so I believe it. And never kind of going beyond that and say, why is it true, right? Or wanting it to be true is sufficient reason for believing it to be true, and not the fact that it's true or not true.
Okay.
Right? So another big one is consequential, that there's a fallacy called appeal to consequences, that, this would be sad, so I'm not going to believe it. And no matter what the consequences, whether it's happy to believe, whether it changes your life, whether it whatever you want to say, that you should believe it to be true because you're convinced of it, not because of the consequences. That you care what's true and not. But a lot of people, they kind of say, well, this church, it transformed my life, and it's great for my family, and it's good to raise kids in, which is true. It can transform your life, and it's good for the kids and all that, but that doesn't mean it's actually true.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Well, so there's almost an us and a them going on then. If the belief system is that different, that extreme, I suppose there's almost an us and a them that would develop around that. We are not Lutheran, for example, or that.
Yeah, which I guess I don't really see that too much. Like you see the kind of the move away from it's not a religion, it's a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
but then at the same time, you know, within evangelicalism, the Catholics are kind of out. LDS Church is kind of out. But yeah, you know, there is a bit of an us and a them in that, you know, we have the right mix, and you can't really be moral. You can't really deserve salvation unless you have this correct mix. So there's a bit of that, but you know, that's bad PR, so they don't stress that too much.
Well, I mean, that's one of the interesting things about megachurches, especially, is that they often don't even tell what denomination they are,
Yeah.
and they're very careful not to be upfront about the dogmas that you must believe in before. I guess they kind of get you through the door for a while, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bit. Although I've heard of one, I'm not going to name it, but yeah, you kind of go through a catechism. From what I hear, that you can attend loosely. You can give money to them, but to be a member, you know, you have to kind of go through this process.
Okay.
But
okay, so you can have pizza once in a while or play sand volleyball, but you don't get to be a member unless.
Yeah, which is pretty loose because there's people kind of coming and going all the time. But yeah, you wonder what's behind that with. It's so loose and kind of, maybe that's just a phenomenon within megachurches, where, you know, you have smaller churches, it's pretty distinct, you're a member or not a member. But.
Well, you exited, though, fairly far. I mean, the kind of religious tradition you come out of, and I come out of one of those two, Pentecostalism, same way, we're the only ones who are right, and even the other Christians are going to hell. They're all wrong. But you exited, as I did, even farther away. In other words, you didn't become a United Church of Christ, a very liberal Christian who is, you know, kind of halfway in between, I suppose. So I'm interested in how you decided, or why you decided, or how long it took you to go all the way out of the religious tradition you were born into. Because do you consider yourself a Christian at all now?
I don't, no. And for a while I did. But, you know, I kind of came to terms with a Christian, you know, I guess, you know, nothing holds true for all Christians. So, you know, to me, a Christian is Trinitarian, they're conditionalist, which is a good point that, well, by conditionalist, I mean the doctrine of hell. You can, salvation is conditional upon, you know, faith or grace or whatnot. So it's kind of funny that you should mention, like, all the way out from Trinitarian conditionalism, that you're a Unitarian Universalist, right?
Yes.
But, so yeah, I kind of, to me, that's what it means, but, you know, I know LDS are not Trinitarian, Jehovah's Witnesses aren't Trinitarian, Unitarian Christians, so I guess that's not necessarily central, but when people say it, that's kind of what they're getting at. And they kind of believe in hell, but a lot of denominations don't. But, so yeah, I guess it's kind of thinking about it, thinking about theological issues. YouTube.
Okay.
Just, you know, you see like debates between Muslims and Christians and different denominations of Christian, and you kind of see that, wow, that really makes sense what this person said. You know, with the argument of hell, I don't know if you've heard it, but it's that if you have a how does it go? An omnipotent being that's also benevolent, right? Then why are there people tormented in hell for eternity? Is he unwilling or is he unable? Right? So if he's unable, then he's malevolent. If he's unable, he's impotent. If he's unwilling, he's malevolent, right? So
Okay.
you really can't have a God and a hell at the same time, right? So that kind of convinced me against conditionalism.
So, okay, so you just began to think through these things, and you started looking for information out in the world. And of course, we live in an internet world now where even a kid who has been raised in a totally lockstep sort of religious tradition can slip away and Google arguments for atheism or arguments against God and begin to discover some facts out there in the world, or some other ways of thinking anyway.
Definitely.
Yes, David Niosi, who is a secular humanist, and I had a great conversation about that. If you're locked in a small town in the South, and your parents are totally forcing you to believe in a particular way, what can you do? Well, the internet is out there, and nowadays maybe high schools won't let you look up the porn sites, but keywords like God are a little more difficult to control, and so young people can begin to explore the world and think outside the box a little bit again.
Yeah, definitely. And then maybe I'm being maybe a little too optimistic, but I think maybe there's just a general trend towards rationality and free thinking that maybe people are a little more liberal increasingly. I don't know if you get that, but just like with gay marriage, everything is kind of flipped. So I don't know.
Well, the numbers seem to indicate that people under 40 are definitely dropping the more politically right-wing religious traditions because they don't see anything wrong with simple things like gay marriage and women's right to choose and these kinds of issues. And so when they begin to think about those things, and there's a little crack, in what mom and dad said, and they begin to explore a little bit. And again, yes, I mean the amazing thing about the internet is you can be reading Spinoza next, it's you can begin to explore these issues. And so you began to question you'd been raised with the omnipotent, the totally powerful, and the omniscient, the absolutely all-knowing God, right? And so, and these questions of totality began to grate, or you began to question those ideas.
Yeah, which kind of at the same time when I talk to people, you wonder if anybody really believes that. I haven't met anybody that the God of classical theism is kind of the invisible man. He lives in the sky and sometimes grants wishes and whatnot. But when you ask anybody, they don't really believe that he's outside of time and space and all these properties that we normally give existent things. He doesn't have any of that. So it's really like modern theologians would say something like, God doesn't exist, he subsists, which I don't know if that some people are turned off by that. They think it's just word salad. But I don't think anybody really believes in classical theism. And I think that there's something of a false dichotomy between atheism and theism, in that we tend to believe in objective morality, meaning, moral obligation, and we believe in beauty, and a lot of people would assign that to God. Or it could be true just because that's how we define God. God is the source, or God is how the universe got here. The universe is here, therefore there's a God, which it kind of works, right? But we're not saying that that's necessarily inexplicable, which is, I think, what people mean when they say God, that it just exists inexplicably, right?
Well, and one of the interesting things about that you bring up is, yes, how much do people really even know about the bases of their particular religious faith? The Catholic theologians who did talk about the prime mover and those kinds of ways of talking about how the universe began and God's place in it. It's just kind of, oh, well, yeah, sure, I'm religious because it's kind of easy. It's in the United States, it's easier to be Christian than not. So I guess I'll just kind of take that and not think about it very much.
Yeah, which a lot of people are, and I guess it works. It works for them, but just certain things where you kind of see maybe there's a conflict between two concepts, and I don't know. You wonder why that is, but.
So you began in your own religious journey then to really look at logic and science and obviously skepticism as ways to find meaning then in the universe.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's see. I kind of see you have skepticism on one hand and kind of delusional thinking on the other, where like if someone says, I believe this is true because, it makes me happy or whatever, that's not reality that you're looking at, right? That's kind of a delusion, right? And then if you're looking at it skeptically, you're trying to look at how it really is, right? So, and skepticism, I think, is different from, I don't believe anything, or, oh yeah, you can't prove to me this table is in front of me, right? But I see it as, the more skeptical you are, the more reality-based you are, and the more, believing it on the consequences of the belief instead of the truth itself, that gets you more into delusion. Which isn't to say that you have to come at it with a specific conclusion, or to say that that there is no hereafter or something, but you're not going after, a certain belief at the end result of skepticism. You're just looking at it to try to find how it is.
Well, so in other words, you're saying that there's a difference between saying there is an afterlife and I believe it, even no matter what, because my tradition tells me, and then on the other hand, completely denying it because, there is no science to back that up, but allowing the mystery to be is another step in terms of one doesn't have to be totally skeptical, I suppose, or not. You don't have to be a Descartes just saying I will only believe what I can touch, right?
Well, I kind of wonder how do you believe in a mystery? Like if you don't know something, how can you say you believe it? Which is kind of interesting. That how do you believe something that you can't perceive? So I don't know. I don't see skepticism as having a happy medium. I just think it's kind of like more skeptical the better. I mean, maybe you could say hyper-skepticism, where like prove to me reality exists or something like that. But I kind of view that as something different.
I sometimes think of skepticism as a religious practice. Some people pray and some people skepticize.
Yeah.
Because it's ways of comprehending reality, isn't it?
Yeah, that's interesting. That they both kind of go towards. Some people kind of understand based on faith, and some people understand it through rational inquiry, and they kind of go towards the supremacy of the universe, or I don't know if there's a better way of saying that, but ultimate things, right? And I'm just wondering, what's the ground of everything? The ground that grounds everything. It's kind of a wild concept, but yeah, we don't know. It's a mystery, but
well, the ground of being is one of the ways I think that some very liberal Christian theologians, Paul Tillich, for example, get around the question, is I'm going to call that which is everything God, so I can continue using the term God by saying, okay, God is the entire universe, or God is the ground of being, or God is the totality of everything that must the parts of a radio add up to more than just the radio, just the parts, and
Sure.
that. But you've decided not to do that, I think, as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can use the word God, although it's such a nebulous concept that each person has their own different opinion of what you're talking about. I like to use the straightforward language. But I mean, you can say that, God as, like in terms of God and the gaps, but use it not in a derisive way, right? That, that you could have a relationship with God in the same way that you can have a relationship with music, right? It's not in the straightforward sense that you can kind of see God as the source of morality. But to me, it's more of a brute fact, But yeah, that's kind of the language that I use. But I like, the ground of being and that liberal Christianity verbiage. I think that they're really trying to desperately hold on to Christianity. But like Bishop Spong, I really like his work.
Right.
And kind of his, when we talk about the hereafter, he has a book dedicated to why he believes in the hereafter. I haven't read it, but it's interesting. And then if you ever heard of William Lane Craig?
No, I have not.
Oh, he's a famous Christian apologist. And he has a book on why he believes in a hereafter, and he's convinced he has sound reason for it.
Okay.
But,
all right.
But,
okay. Well, and I mean, that's one of the things that people do stick with Christianity, or I suppose many different religious traditions. Hinduism because of reincarnation, or Buddhism because of reincarnation, and the karma idea that the worry that simple non-existence after death brings to them, they want to hold on to some kind of belief in an afterlife.
Yeah, that's a big time, appeal to consequences, and kind of makes you wonder, are we believing it because of its consequences, right? But yeah, with Hinduism, it's kind of, I've heard one philosopher say that, what's the difference between being a slave being reincarnated as a king and a slave dying and a king being born? If you don't have, you don't remember your previous life, right? So that's kind of maybe a pessimistic way to look at it. I don't know. But a lot of people don't believe in here. Like Jehovah's Witnesses, I learned that they believe that you die forever, but God remembers you. He creates a perfect copy of you in heaven. But you're still dead, right? But there's a copy of you that lives eternally, which, that's would be kind of nice, right? But
well, again, it's often,
right?
When you begin to think these things through, they don't add up exactly. But
yeah. But one thing you do live on after in the form of reruns for public access shows. So
absolutely.
That's a silver lining.
Well, I mean, I think from a strictly scientific bent, we can say that our molecules are not going to exit the universe after all.
Well, some people I've read. I don't know if it's in cosmology that they say that matter is just going to shut down, that the universe is going to be unstable, but so we might have a whole nother universe after all. Or if there's like an ultimate death of the universe, which is kind of deep, but that the universe is just a blip in nothingness and will just blip out again. But
it could have, or the Big Bang could become a big crunch, and then another Big Bang, and so there may be ultimate and complete and infinite reincarnation in that way, except it's on such a large picture that we won't notice, perhaps. So you exited the tradition, and as do many people who come to First Unitarian Society, but you've decided to get up on Sunday morning and come to church, to a congregation. What's your reasoning on that one?
Let's see. I kind of was looking on YouTube and the internet, and let's see, Bob Tapp. Read some of his stuff.
Well-known humanist.
Yep. And gosh, I thought, wow, this is neat. Like the flagship humanist congregation is in Minneapolis. I did not know that.
There you
go. And my wife was raised UU, and she went to another church that's a little bit more new agey, and she kind of, was into that when she was little, but then kind of thought maybe that's not me. And we were kind of looking around at churches, and so that one she decided wasn't for her. We went to another one that was a lot more palatable, and we thought, well, we could go to this one. And then we came to FUS, and we thought, yeah, this is it. Like, it's the sermons are deep. So yeah, thanks for that. And it's not like a lot of places where it's just so superficial that it's really, there's so many taboo subjects in theology and philosophy that a lot of people don't get into that.
Right.
But yeah, it's not like other, which there's so, I don't know what the word is, but it's not your typical church, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, it had been argued by philosophers, Auguste Comte, for example, that you could have a religion without God or without the usual trappings, but it was seldom tried or didn't work out usually when it was. But John Dietrich came to Minneapolis in 1916 and began to read poetry instead of scripture, and began to meditate instead of praying, and substituted secular songs for hymns. And by golly, if we didn't have the sound on and we just filmed a Sunday assembly, I think that most people would say, oh yeah, that's church. It has the corporate get-together. We get together, we talk and slap each other on the back and have a good time, and we have coffee and meals and discussions. It's just that we don't have this binding, you must believe in this sort of thing. And
sure. And I'd say even if the audio was on, people would say, yeah, that's church, right? Where, a lot of people think that if you're humanist, you must not believe in anything, or another thing, even controversial within humanism, that you can't be a humanist and believe in supernatural, let's say, or be a free thinker or skeptic and still believe in it, which I don't think that's necessarily the case, that you have to, come down on something, or you necessarily, if you're a humanist, necessarily have to have a bad attitude about life, and I don't know if that's the case. But I'd say, yeah, it's uplifting, and it feels like church, but with a little extra, I guess.
Well, we try to be church without the dogma, and be a free space or a free zone for what you're thinking about, so that you can throw that trial balloon up and say, oh, there's no God, or, oh, well, maybe God is, the ground of being, and not be, laughed at or giving anyone a heart attack or a heart palpitation about that, but, to be a safe place to think and maybe even continue your journey in some ways, because there's always something new. That's
yeah. Or, yeah, you'd be surprised with, talking to a lot of people that you think everybody's on the same page as you, and then you'll hear something like, well, I'm really against vaccines. And you're like, really?
How can you do that?
Right?
Yeah,
but I guess it happens. And, I
there
saw
you go.
this study, might be, what is it, Children in My Grandfather's House? What was it? Robert Tapp wrote it. I think he might have made reference to the study. But that 2% of UUs consider themselves fundamentalist Christians, which I would have thought, that's great that people can feel comfortable here, but...
yeah, that's amazing. Well, no dogma. That's the interesting thing. Got to take off. Thanks so much. I'm David Breeden, the Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society.